Hello!
Hello!
Welcome to Ask a Reporter again for this week.
Yay! Happy Friday!
Happy Friday to you.
Woo.
Happy Friday to you.
You probably heard me coughing a minute ago because I just ate a carrot.
Did they make you
Grown
cough?
by farmers. Well, I ate it so quickly because I knew I had to come in here.
You ate a carrot quickly.
Half of it's still sitting on my desk.
I didn't know it was a health hazard.
Well, it could be if you eat it that fast.
Well, there you go.
Coughing away. I was trying to be really quiet because we sit back here for a few seconds.
Waiting.
And then we reveal. Here we are.
I hope you aren't eating carrots while you're watching this because apparently it's a health hazard. But
You can eat your carrot.
if you are eating a carrot and we read out your question, please make sure you don't
There I
choke
go
on
again.
it. Don't cough like this. Make sure that you're in a safe environment,
Yes.
carrot-free.
Yeah, settle in, get comfortable, because it's Ask a Reporter time.
Ask a Reporter time. Our subject this week is Amelia's Queensland Drought story.
Yes.
It's a lovely story with some very amazing kids in it from rural areas in Queensland that shared
awesome
their story,
kids.
which was fantastic. So I might just start off by asking my own question.
Oh, sure.
How did you get in touch with those kids to put together this story?
So the kids that I got in touch with, the two boys, Angus and Lockie, I actually was trying to work out how to find some kids, and generally with these kind of stories it's a bit open, so you just say, hey Amelia, can you go find some kids, and then I go away and just try and do it. So what I did was I sort of looked up some stories which had actually been done before on Droughts. And so Angus's older brother, had actually done a story for the ABC before, and it was just like a picture of him, and then I knew which school he went to, so I contacted his school, and the principal there was awesome. So yeah, they helped me out from Hughenden and from Christmas Creek. So with Lockie, I can't remember, how did I find Lockie? Oh, Lockie was another old ABC story. So it's pretty awesome because we can kind of just, get in touch with journalists who have done other stories, which really helps with stuff like this because, yeah, you sometimes just need to find kids remotely. And then Angus and Lockie both filmed everything that you saw themselves with the help of either their school or their family. Yeah, so we often do that. You guys might have noticed.
Filming.
That was the... He's
know.
not very good at it.
Kind of look like you're hiding actually or something, I don't know.
This is why Nathan doesn't do stories, he's a producer.
It's true.
And host. But yeah, so that's how, we often find kids from all over Australia and even sometimes the world. Often you can kind of look online. Thank goodness we have the internet, because that would be really more difficult.
I've seen photos of BTN journalists working before internet days, and they would get their stories.
Oh, you mean you don't remember that?
Thank you. I'm not that old yet.
Just
and there's photos of them, so they'd get their stories, and then they would have to run down to the library and hire as many books as they could to research the topic. So,
can you imagine?
And just get on the phone and call people.
Yeah, that would be crazy.
So,
way more, running.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So this story that Amelia put together couldn't have happened in the past because we would never have the time to be able to fly to Queensland, go out to those stations, interview those kids, get the vision back, put it on air. We couldn't do it. So the internet's amazing for that.
Even though I would love it if I got flown to Queensland to speak to these people. But it is, that's it. There's no time. So
No time.
It's a quick turnaround. But yeah, they were awesome kids. Both of them were so good, so helpful. And they had interestingly different experiences because Angus's area, Hughenden, is kind of central sort of Queensland. I'm not specifically going to say where because I don't want to get it wrong. But it was quite central, and it's in an area that is drought declared, and as I said in my story, it's like 90% of Queensland right now is drought declared, so that's so much. But interestingly, Lockie is actually just outside of that, so he's sort of further down towards the Gold Coast, around that area. Am I right there? Christmas Creek, I'm pretty sure that's where it is. Along the coastline anyway, where it's actually a lot wetter at the moment. Am I right?
Yeah, well,
See, I asked Nathan because Nathan is from Queensland. That's why he says things like school and pool.
That's not how I sound at all.
I'm sorry, Queenslanders.
Yes.
I did that was really just like a...
It is true. I'm a
I don't even
Queenslander.
think that's true.
I grew up on a farm in Queensland, and so look, this story is very familiar for me because in my childhood we went through drought all the time, and so it was a very common thing, and it was very interesting seeing the kids talk about it too because we went through similar things.
Yeah.
When we were kids.
That's it. So he's probably going to be able to help you help to answer some of the questions today.
Speaking of,
yes,
we should get to some questions. Does that sound good?
Let's do it.
Right, let's start off with Woodend Primary School. Hello, Woodend.
Hi, guys.
And Jessie wants to know, why do a lot of droughts seem to happen in Queensland? Carrot Girl?
Is that my new name?
Yeah.
Ah, dear. I was busy coughing.
Sorry.
And then I got distracted by Carrot Girl. I actually missed the question.
I was so proud of my Carrot Girl call, though. Why do most droughts seem to happen in Queensland?
Oh, why do they? I mean, I don't really know, because the whole drought thing is actually quite difficult to predict. I think it's just probably mainly because of the climate there. It's a lot hotter at certain times of the year. It's just generally a warmer climate. It's a difficult one to question. Droughts are actually, that's kind of the problem with droughts, is that they are actually very difficult to predict. And also, they just tend to just sometimes happen, sometimes not happen. Just like sometimes, you might have crazy amounts of rain all of a sudden, and storms when it would normally be warmer. That's actually happened a lot this year, and late last year. So just these things sometimes kind of happen. And are difficult to predict. I
think there's two big things to remember about this. One is that there is droughts that happen all over Australia, and so droughts are usually talked about most when they affect a lot of farmers in an area, because farmers are the ones first affected by this stuff, because their crops rely on water, their livestock rely on water, so it hits them really hard very quickly. And so a drought is us just saying there hasn't been a lot of rain in that area for a long period of time. But even if there's a season or two of low rain, it can really affect farmers in a lot of different areas. So a drought can be a small drought, or it can be a really long drought, but it can still have a huge impact on the farmers in that area.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, sorry, it's not just Queensland. But I know what you mean. Like, we do tend to hear a lot about Queensland, but I was just reading before, there was a really long South Australia and Western Australia, I think it was, drought that went on for like 12 years.
Yeah.
So it definitely happens everywhere. And to clarify as well, so a drought doesn't mean that you don't get any rain. It means that you're getting less rain than predicted. So how there are some areas where it's expected that you might have a really long period of time without rain, like desert.
The Simpson Desert.
Yes, exactly.
No one's going to go, well, it's been in drought for 40 odd years now.
Still hasn't gone. So the idea is there that, farmers will, have crop times where they plant crops and stuff like that. And so they plan these things, and then if the rain never comes, that's when it becomes a real problem. And then if it starts to happen for longer and longer periods of time where they're not getting enough rain, then that's when it often becomes drought declared. So something to think about. So even if these areas start getting a little bit of rain, it doesn't necessarily mean the drought is over.
Yeah. Woodend also want to know, in a drought, where do farmers get water to keep themselves and their animals alive?
Do you want to answer this, Farmer Baz?
I can answer that.
That's your nickname today.
Again, it kind of depends, but for most farmers, some will rely on bore water, so underground water, which they may be able to bring up enough water to keep their livestock and their family hydrated and with water. But a lot of the time, the water in some areas isn't able to be used, or there is no water underneath certain farmers, and so that's not a reliable option, and there's not enough there that they can just carry on like nothing, everything's okay. They don't need rain, because you've got to remember, rain also lets crops grow that the livestock eat, or if they're a cropping kind of farmer, then they need that to grow those crops. And so the only other option is trucking in water, which is when we had droughts, we didn't have any bore water underneath the ground, so we had to truck in water. So we'd get trucks of water delivered, they'd put it into our tanks and top us up, and then we'd just have enough water to have baths and to drink and cook and things like that.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's such a different lifestyle. I mean, if anyone's watching from the country, you would know. Hello. Because from coming from me as a city kid, you just turn on the tap and bam, and it's all just you don't really think about it, but it's pretty precious stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Droughts can affect cities too, but there's a lot of people that are trying to make sure that doesn't happen. They try and manage the water supply so that that doesn't happen, or they, you know, create things like desalination plants and things like that to try and make sure that people can have water no matter what time of year it is.
Yeah.
So.
And then you take this, you know, outside of Australia as well, and droughts happening in developing countries, that can be even worse. Like, the impact is even bigger in some ways, because, you know, you have these people who are already struggling a lot and already don't have much. And then you put a drought on top of that, and all sorts of things can happen, and it's, just even more difficult. Because, you know, if you have just not much water and everybody's trying to use the water that you do have, then, you know, whole wars can break out. Like, it's just really, it's not a great thing to happen in a developing country either. So, yeah.
That's a very good point too.
Yes.
Zico wants to know, how might we be able to help people suffering through a drought?
Yeah, well, look, there are lots of people who are trying to help. I don't know, particularly there might be some sort of funds or charities that you could maybe donate to, but I'm not sure. You might have to look into that. But there are people that are already trying to help a lot of farmers, you know, by just doing things like bringing food and supplies to farmers and farming families, you know, giving them hay and things like that. So, yeah, there are definitely people who are helping. Did you experience any of that kind of thing when you were...
Yeah, there were some charity groups that would come along to farms and give farming families some supplies like food and water and a few other things just to help out, which was really lovely. And I know that meant a lot to the farmers around our area as well when that happened, that other people are thinking of them.
Exactly, because I mean, you might already, you know a little bit about how this can really affect people. You saw, you know, a little bit from Angus in my story talking about his experiences and his family's experiences with drought, and you could just tell, like, it's actually a really difficult thing for families to cope with, because it's their livelihood. So, you know, you can imagine if your parents suddenly came home and said, well, whatever job I'm doing, you know, I can't do it for a while. It's not really happening. You know, it's not going to make enough money. And, you know, it would be really like a bit of a worry for you and your parents. So, yeah, these things can be pretty tough on farmers and farming families. So any little help, I guess, is a good thing.
Yeah, because there's kind of two factors to it. So there's one, it's like your parents saying, I'm going to be working for, I've, you know, worked out I'm going to be working for the next year or two, but I won't make any money from it, which is stressful itself. But they're still working really hard, but there's just, you know, no money coming in from the other side. But there's also, you know, when you're trucking in water or trying to get water from other sources to for your family and for your livestock to stay alive, that's really expensive as well. So it costs a lot of money and you're not making any money at the same time. So it's a stressful time. So that's why I think they were bringing in, you know, food and things like that during bad droughts to try and help out, which is very nice.
Yeah.
Skylar wants to know, why do farmers live in areas where droughts are more likely to happen?
I don't think they specifically do, because like we were saying before, I guess it's just droughts just happen in many different places. It's just that, like Nathan was saying, I suppose in a city you have these sort of things that are already put in place to try and stop droughts from affecting people in places like in cities. But when it comes to, you know, these country areas, it just happens that if there's a drought, then that's just where you are, and then you've got kids in Lockie in Christmas Creek who isn't affected. So, you know, it's just luck. It's, you know, they could be affected, and they had been affected, Lockie and his family, before by droughts, but this time they weren't. So yeah, it's not really a case of just going, oh, I better not go here because they've had droughts before, because wherever you really go, it's possible to have a drought. Yeah. And
there's some of the ground, like it might be really good for crops or things like that. Like some of the farms just have to be in those areas because that's where the crops grow. So sometimes they don't get a choice. And
space, you know, you can't have them just pick. You need space to have a big farm and grow things.
A little farm in town, and
look,
might get enough for one loaf of bread, and that's about it.
I call that a herb garden.
Well, that would be nice. Not going to make much money, but that's okay.
No.
Isabel wants to know, do people still go to school and go to work if there's a drought?
Yeah, so you just covered the sort of going to work bit before, but yeah, very good question. Yeah, they do. But Evie, you were actually telling me as well. So like Angus and Lockie, well, Angus in particular, because his family's that area's in drought, but he was still going to school. But he was also helping his dad as much as possible and his family as much as possible. And you were telling me that there are times when, you know, kids are actually just having to be sort of taken out of school a bit to help out on the farm and in times of trouble, right?
Yeah, it can be time. It can be just necessary that, you know, kids might have to stay out from school to help out with their parents with the farm, because in farming there's a lot of times during the year where it's really, really busy, and usually when there's harvesting or picking or whatever it may be. So there's little times where you just need all hands on deck, and sometimes the farms won't be able to afford to put people on just for those short periods of time, or they can't find people to employ during those periods of time, and that's why, you know, kids will often lend a hand, and you might see kids on farms doing quite like adult jobs like driving tractors and things like that, because they just have to, and you know, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, that's it. Or driving a ute. Like
As
Angus.
was in the story, which we should say, okay, so driving a vehicle on a private property is completely fine. So while it looks a bit crazy for city kids to see a young kid, 11-year-old, driving a ute, then on the farm it's completely fine, and it's you know, something that they really need to learn to do so that they can help themselves if there's an emergency, or help their family members if there's an emergency too. Yeah,
which is a big reason why Angus actually knew how to drive that ute, because of emergency. So he'll go out with his mum or his dad or his grandpa, I think it was, and you know, they'll go and do all sorts of things, heavy lifting and cutting down trees and whatnot. And so if anything happens, they've actually, his parents taught Angus how to drive just in case, so that he can act quickly and get whoever's in trouble back to somewhere where they can be treated.
He won't have any trouble getting his license.
Yeah, I know. I wonder if he can like skip the whole process.
No, you can't.
Like, can you just go straight to test?
No.
No.
No, you still got to do your
because
thing.
he was a good driver, judging by that.
Although
vision.
one thing I will say, because I grew up driving on the farm as well, and you don't know the road rules, so you know how to drive really well, but you've never been through a traffic light.
You don't know how to give way and everything.
Yeah, there's no other cars.
Good point. Good point.
So there is things to learn.
Yeah.
Isaiah wants to know, why can't we do water drops like we do food drops in a famine?
That's an interesting question.
I'm trying to help. Very good work, Isaiah.
I like that thinking. I think that just would be too much. Yeah, too much space. Unfortunately, I don't think it would work. But I like your thinking there.
There are some times where the government will truck water in if it's really desperate, and there's a lot of people in one area that really desperately need water. They'll help by trucking in water, but that's about all they can do.
The sky,
well, if you do it from the sky, it's very heavy, and it'll
so much water would be needed too. That it would be a lot. But I like your thinking.
Daniel wants to know, in drought areas, do people have access to wells and underground water? We touched on that before, but yes, they do. But a lot of areas can't access underground water. It might be really salty, or there might be other things wrong with it that mean you can't drink it and it's not useful. Or there just mightn't be any underneath you. It's very much luck of the draw, depending on where you live.
Yeah. Good questions, though.
Yeah, very good questions. Lily wants to know, how long does it need to be without rain to be called a drought?
Called a drought, yeah. So, was that Lily?
Yes, Lily.
Hey, Lily. We kind of touched on that a little bit before, too. So, basically, like I was saying before, there are, some areas which just don't have rain very often at all. And that's sort of their norm. But drought is sort of measured basically on whether or not you get as much rain as expected. So if you're not getting as much rain as expected for a long enough period of time, then it's drought declared. It will likely become drought declared. So it really depends on where you are and the amount of rain that you normally get. So that's how drought is measured. So if, like I was saying, even if they do get a little bit of rain, if it's not as much as usual or is expected, then that can be drought. So, yeah.
We'll go to Elizabeth Vale now, and Samicha wants to know, why isn't it raining enough in Queensland right now, or what's happening to make there not be enough water to go around?
Yeah.
And
Well,
do you
you go.
want to
No,
answer
you
that?
go.
So there are weather patterns that can especially affect Queensland that sort of happen in the Pacific Ocean between here and South America. There are weather patterns that can decrease the amount of rain that Australia will get, and especially Queensland and Queensland farming areas, sort of more central Queensland. So those weather patterns, weather researchers can know about them ahead of time, and they can see that they're coming. They can sort of predict that they're coming, but they never know how bad they're going to be and how long they'll last for. So that's kind of one of the things that can cause a lack of rain, but it can just be luck. It can be just you don't get the rain. Sometimes it'll just miss those areas and it'll go for a long time and they'll just miss out each time, and that can be heartbreaking for those farmers.
Yeah, and a lot of research shows as well that climate change could be having an impact on natural disasters and things like that, including drought, making them more frequent. So yeah, that's another factor as well.
Serafina wants to know, how can people survive if there are droughts? What ways can we protect ourselves against droughts?
Well, see, in Australia that is a bit easier for the reasons that we kind of said, so people tend to help. You know, you can sort of travel to towns, or you can, rely on the water that you do have for a while. Or like you said, sometimes the government will, help bring in water or, stuff like that. But then the thing is probably more if you're in a developing country, that's when it becomes a bit more difficult because you don't have any of that assistance. There's really nothing you can do. So that can have a massive impact on countries like that. And there are a lot of African countries where drought is a really big problem. So yeah, that can be a bit tough.
Absolutely. Jordan wants to know, why do droughts not happen everywhere? So why do we have areas of even Queensland, the same state, that are always really wet?
Yeah.
Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to have a crack?
You sound like you want to have a crack, so you
Well,
go for it. I like just letting you go, and then I'll expand on whatever you say.
So I always wanted to grow up, because we grew up in an area that was often dry. I always wanted to grow up in a rainforest, because I was like, it rains all the time in a rainforest. They're called a rainforest. So that sounds lovely. Like, you got rain all the time. It's lovely. But so much of it depends on how far you are away from the ocean, what the climate is like in your area. Sometimes there can be things like big mountain ranges that will stop clouds forming or change the pressure around that area, and therefore stop rain going through. So you often get more rain around the coasts of Australia than you do inland, because the rain obviously has to travel further from the ocean where it's created.
Like where Lockie is, close to where Lockie is around Christmas Creek.
Yeah, and that's why he's probably more likely to get rain than Angus. Yeah, but there's heaps and heaps of different factors as to why drought happens in some places and not others, but most of it is just how far you are away from the ocean and what sort of features of the land there are around you, and just rough climate.
Yeah, that's it.
Savannah wants to know, how long do droughts usually last?
Yeah, so they can last a really long time. Like I was saying before, like 12 years. I read a thing actually that I think this is true, maybe we can verify it, but I read something just before when I was doing some research that the longest drought ever was 400 years, and it was in Chile in South America, and it was around like the 1500s. So that was what I read, which is pretty crazy. 400 years, so they must have had that recorded or worked it out somehow. Amazing science. So that's pretty crazy. But yeah, look, droughts can last from 1 year up to many years. So yeah, like I was saying, you might get some rain in that time. You probably would, but it doesn't mean the drought is over if you're just not getting enough or as much as usual.
Kai and Ethan both have similar questions they'd like us to answer. Ethan said, how do they grow grass to feed cows in dry weather? And Kai said, how long can animals last in a drought? So what can they do to keep animals alive if there's no water around?
Yeah, I think that's it's a difficult thing to do. I'm guessing like bringing in sort of resources from outside of the farm, moving them to different areas. What do you think? Do you know much about that?
Yeah, the thing is, there's ways that you can do it, but it's really expensive no matter what you do. So if you're bringing in hay from an area that still does have rain, you can feed your animals, but it
Paying
costs you a
for
lot
it.
of money. It's a lot cheaper to grow your own. And same with water. If you're trucking in water, it costs a lot of money, whereas if it falls on your property, then it's free. And so there are ways to do it, but at some point it just becomes too expensive, and you have to start getting rid of your animals. So they'll either sell them off or find other farms that they can go to that still do have some feed around to keep them alive.
Yeah. So yeah, it can be difficult. Like Angus's family have lost animals, and it does definitely happen, unfortunately, and that can be pretty tough.
Yeah, and that would be very hard on his whole family to see all of these animals that live on his farm to all of a sudden sort of have to go off, and then the farm would be quite empty for a while.
That's it. It's a pretty interesting topic.
It is, actually. And thank you to Angus and Lockie for sharing their stories in that piece. They did a fantastic job. So
they were awesome.
Thank you very much to them.
Yeah. Cool.
Now, that's about all the time we have for questions on Drought, but I will give you a sneak peek into what you can expect next week.
Oh, I don't even know.
It is Amelia's story on happiness.
Oh, yay!
So it's actually a happy one. Amelia, do you want to give us a brief rundown on...
because I didn't know that either.
No, I haven't told you yet.
Surprise, surprise.
So do you want to give us a brief rundown on what you're doing about happiness next week? Because I'm happy that you're doing happiness.
I was going to say you're lucky because I am happy about surprises. They make me happy.
Yeah.
So my story is actually about a survey called the Happiness Survey. You guys might have heard about it. They've been doing it every year since 2012. It's commissioned by the United Nations, and basically it works out the happiest countries in the whole world. And here's a little hint, Australia made it onto the list.
Ooh, yes. But where?
Yes, but where on the list? Ooh, and what was the top country? And yeah, basically you will find out a little bit about what actually makes people happy when it comes down to it, and why and how they actually work this out. So lots of fun.
Very happy we're doing a story on happiness. It's a very happy story and I like it.
Happy. That means lots of smiling.
Yeah, lots of smiling and lots of happy questions that you can think of for next week. So if you've
think
got any questions about happiness, what causes it, what countries are the happiest.
What makes us happy? You might get a little bit of that in my story, actually.
Yeah. Actually, you'll find out some of Amelia's favourite things at the start of that story, and they are give us a clue on one of them. Just tell us one. There's three things, or technically
there are three,
four, I suppose.
3 or 4-ish things. I've mentioned it in other stories.
Ooh.
Sort of.
Okay.
No, I have a little bit. I have
a very vague clue.
For instance, there was a story. So this is going to be a bit cryptic, but a story on political parties, and in that story, I spoke about something I like a lot, which may be mentioned again. Okay,
tune in next week on Tuesday for BTN. And you can watch that story, and then tune in again next Friday for Ask a Reporter, and you can ask Amelia all about her favourite thing, which things.
I think you'll easily guess this if you go and look at that story.
You probably will. Yeah. It's not too difficult.
Have a good weekend, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.